Healthcare
Thank,
supply. Yeah, thank you, sir.
yeah, no, thank you so much, Lindsay. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you, sir. Healthcare supply chains are complex structures spanning across multitude organizational and geographical boundaries, providing a critical backbone to the service vital for everyday life. The inherent complexity of such systems can introduce challenge, including inaccurate information, lack of transparency, and limited data provenance. We have brought together an intriguing panel to discuss the need for an intelligent, robust, end-to-end track and trace system for the healthcare supply chains. I would now like to invite Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan, Chief Executive Officer, Derby Foundation, to moderate a panel discussion on intelligent supply chain driven by traceability. The panelists are Mr. Debashish Roy, Head Digital Innovation and Strategic Initiatives at About, Mr. Deepak Bist, Head Strategy and Innovation and Environmental Sustainability at Novartis, and Mr. Vikram Srivastava, Head of Planning, Global Supply Chain, Sun Pharma. Over to you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everybody. Hearty welcome to all the panelists. I think at the outset, I want to request your apologies for my sore throat. Kindly bear with me for the next half an hour. I think to set a background of what we want to discuss today, I think India is going through a very interesting phase, being the global, especially the pharma industry. Companies are fearlessly embarking on a growth trajectory, aspiring to become a low-cost hub for manufacturing and R&D. It, of course, they are facing a huge set of opportunities, both local and global, specifically on the supply chain. Of course, forward-thinking firms are turning their attention to build their capacity and also their capabilities. But of course, the supply chain effectiveness, efficiency are emerging as a new paradigm in the entire pharma industry. I think it's a perfect time to discuss this with the distinguished panel we have today to unearth their views on the topic of discussion. So to kick off the discussion, it is apt that we start off with I would say, hot topic, which is a real-time supply chain visibility and traceability, which has been very hot, especially with the pandemic times. I would first call upon Debashish to come and give his insights on what is his views on how do we really need to manage the real-time supply chain visibility and traceability aspects. Over to you, Debashish.
Hey, good evening. Good evening. Thanks, Lakshmi.
Yeah,
so I think, I would just start with a very, at a very high level in supply chain parlance, right? I mean, we all are supply chain people from various organizations and at various point of their career. And we would agree that there is a saying that is very, very famous, which is what gets measured gets done, right? And that is where you will hear industry stalwarts saying, you give me a better forecast visibility, and I will give you a better supply chain, right? So which is nothing but alignment of supply with demand. And that is where most of us struggle in our day-to-day life, right? So visibility, right, as Dr. Lakshmi mentioned, visibility will allow or generally allows enterprises to identify disruptions up and down the supply chain and synchronize supply and demand both at the point of sale and at the required time of delivery. So this is on the supply and demand side. At the same time, it also helps companies reduce risks and costs throughout the supply chain while improving the overall service levels. So that's my quick 2 cents on it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. No, fully understand. I think now the industry is also talking about integrating, especially artificial intelligence, smart factories into the whole value chain of the entire supply chain. Deepak, what is your thought process on what are the key elements that needs to be integrated into the whole value chain of the supply chain? Bring into the concept of the smart factories and other aspects as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. I think we all agree with the fact that the digital technologies are expected to transform every link in the supply chain, whether you talk about R&D to the sourcing to your factory operations to marketing, right? But when you really look at the value creation from an innovation perspective across the value chain, there is no one particular element, but really we really need to look more from a holistic perspective. We really need to have an end-to-end view. And as it says that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So what really happens if you try to over-optimize one part of your value chain? Typically what happens, the bottleneck shifts. So let's say if you over-optimize your sourcing process, the bottleneck really shifts to the manufacturing. And if you try to over-optimize your manufacturing, the bottleneck further shifts to your distribution network. So as a company, we are really making a mindful investment to build a high-tech manufacturing and supply chain network, with obviously data and technology as a key enabler for that. And we are partnering with some big tech companies to really transform our core supply chain manufacturing and our distribution network. And one of the use case which we are working, which is very interesting, is we are establishing an insight center that will really allow us to view our whole value chain from the start to the end in terms of how we source, how we do the demand forecasting, how we operate at a shop floor, and how we really supply our products to our customer and patient. Just to summarize this, if you really need to bring the value from the digital innovation across the value chain, one really need to look at more from a holistic perspective, right from choosing the right strategy and really look at the right areas where the value creation become more tangible. And that is something that we really need to look into. I think, and that's the beauty of supply chain, that you really cannot really optimize the supply chain by individualizing, optimizing the individual components of that particular piece.
True, true. Now, taking a cue from your digitization of the supply chain itself, I want to just touch upon ask Vikram, what is his take on how this whole digital imperative has an impact on the entire globalization of procurement and manufacturing and its allied impact on the supply chain itself?
Oh, a very interesting question, Dr. Lakshmi. Thanks. And before I begin, I want to thank NASSCOM for bringing this panel together, and I would want to say a very warm welcome to all the listeners and to my co-panelists. So, Dr. Lakshmi, coming to your question about the digitization space and how it is enabling procurement and manufacturing, every bit of it. So, taking cue from what Deepak was saying, digitization is here to not just impact at every value node of the supply chain, but the entire value chain of the pharma, right from R&D to downstream to distribution and to the demand sensing. And we can see the impact of digitization in almost every sphere of it. Just to share with you a quick anecdote on how digitization and digital transformation is really helping pharma. So we typically talk about S&OP cycles, which have a longer planning horizon of say about 3 to 6 months, that's the kind of planning horizons S&OP look at. The entire digitization, the smart forecasting, demand sensing, right to MRP, to your production scheduling, to your procurement PR process has been squeezed into one seamless activity like an IBP tool, integrated business planning, which has squeezed this entire cycle and which has enabled us to be more agile. The 3 to 6 months is now squeezed to about 4 to 6 weeks. That's the kind of planning cycles we are looking at, and this is all digitally enabled, which helps us to be closer to the market. So we manufacture what is actually needed in the market, and we are able to better sense what my sales and marketing team needs to. So we become more agile, we are more flexible, and at the same point of time, we are more accurate with respect to how we service our demand. So it's a win-win, and I don't think so there is any going backwards on this foot. The industry is also already talking about industry 4.0, industry 5.0. We are already over there. So in my mind, it's always it's a good move forward. Over to you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Yeah, sure. No, I want to just continue with this conversation. Now, having spoke about digitization, obviously the next thought at least comes from most of the consumers, especially people like me. We talk about I would say the widely accepted impact on digitization has been e-commerce, and e-commerce is slowly touching the pharma industry also. With PharmEasy, many such companies which are now, I would say, riding the digital wave, by enabling the aggregator model to build more access to consumers with respect to the pharmacies, right? Now, what is your take on that? How do you think this whole model would evolve?
So,
and what impact it will have on the supply chain itself?
Absolutely. So in my personal view is this is the new normal, that we are going to live in. We in the Gregorian calendar used to talk about BC and AD. So I talk about the new BC and AD. This is before Corona and after the disease. So this this phase that we are living in now, the new normal, is going to be the way forward. The way we are going to interact with our doctors is also going to get digitized, and the way we procure our medicines, the way we order the medicines is also going to, like you rightly said, it's going to e-commerce way, but that's not the end of it. That's the tip of the iceberg in my view, because this is all going to further get aggregated, consolidated. You'll have one platform where you will get your insurance, where your doctor will look at all your reports, your testing will get online, you will order your medicines online, and you will get them delivered ASAP to your doorstep. And then the doctor will also, through smart packaging, monitor how you're consuming your drugs and what kind of, through smart gadgets, through smartphone, smart watches, and through smart gadgets, they will monitor your vitals on the go. So this is the way our healthcare is going to evolve going forward. This is the new normal we are going to live in, and this is going to enable access to critical life-saving medicines, not just life-saving medicines, but also enable a lot of people for consulting doctors which they were not able to visit in the past. So all this is going to transform in my mind. It is only going to help humans lead a better and healthy lifestyle. So in my mind, this is going to happen. On the supply chain part of it, if I have to talk to you about it, the upstream part of the supply chain does not really get impacted, because my procuring of the material and my manufacturing will still remain the same. How I'm going to sense the demand through these apps and tools, how I'm going to forecast what is needed, and how I'm going to do my logistics and distribution. These are the key elements that will change a little bit. We are going to start looking at micro stores, smaller stores, not huge warehouses where we store millions of dollars of medicines. We are going to store the key fast moving medicines closer to the consumer, so that the moment you add an order on the app, within 2 hours you get the medicines. And that's the kind of technology it's going to enable to help us lead normal and healthier lifestyles. So two thumbs up to this, but in my mind, this is just the start, Dr. Lakshmi. This has to evolve a lot more, in my opinion, and it's going to get consolidated and aggregated to a far greater level. That's my take.
Yeah, sure. Debashish, you want to add on to anything what Vikram said?
Completely agree to what he's saying. I mean, he has completely an end-to-end cycle that he has covered. It makes a lot of sense. So,
sure.
Good.
No, okay. I mean, any take on how would it impact the existing players, in terms of managing the new dynamics itself? What is your take on that?
Sure. So I think, while we continue to work on optimizing our internal processes, right, as Vikram was mentioning, it's very important to keep an eye on the evolving marketplace. And I think the speaker previous to this also mentioned and emphasized on that. So a few things again there, which is one, large stockists are aggressively acquiring to increase retailer reach, right? There is an increased competition among the stockists that we are seeing. Chain and e-pharmacies already constitute 5 to 10% of the Indian pharma market sales, right? And growing at 2 to 3 times the market. So that is again something which we should be cognizant of. Then talking about the third pillar, which is very, very critical, especially post-COVID, which is government taking keen interest on trackable supply chain, right? Leveraging digital solutions. And competitors have already started to invest in capturing secondary sales data, using it as a decision and performance parameter. And we are also seeing multiple regional vendors cropping up with solutions offered to stockists and retailers, right? And if you talk about the implications on the other side, so I think if I were to summarize the implications in 2-3 things, which is one, digital analytics will play a key role in bringing this efficiency, reducing the cost, increasing reach, and manage the inventory complexity, right? And second, being pharma companies are already moving towards harnessing supply chain as a strategic differentiator, and vendors seeking partnership with pharma companies for scale have seen a upward trend, and it will continue to do so in times to come.
Great. Yeah, sure. I think we'll take a slight shift in what we've been talking. The next, one of the key things I want to touch upon in today's conversation is also on the innovative personalized therapies which are now emerging. So now where a lot of people are focusing on individual treatments. So in such situation, managing the entire dynamics of the supply chain becomes too complex. So I want to probably pick Deepak's thought process on this.
So thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. As the name suggests, like personalized therapies, right? So these
Yeah.
are the tailored therapies to an individual patient. So what we do is basically we uses the individual genetic profile, and that really guides the medical treatment for the person. So if you imagine the supply chain for such treatment is definitely complex because they are meant for one individual usage, right? So I give an example over here, like we draw the blood from the patient and extract a typical type of cells from the patient. And then these cells are genetically engineered in the labs. So they become really a smart cells. So they can really identify and they destroy the cancer cell when they infuse back these cells in the patient. And you can imagine the uniqueness of the supply chain here. The source and the consumer is the same, which is the patient. And in such case, there are a number of challenges that also really bring in, which we need to consider once we design such kind of a supply chain for such advanced therapies. The first one is definitely the shelf life of such treatment. And everything needs to be turned around within a week. It cannot wait for typical like months or years. That's how the typical lives, like a manufacturing process cycle for a typical conventional therapy in the manufacturing of pharma. Second is the temperature you also need to maintain not only during the transit, but all throughout the manufacturing and as it goes through different nodes through the supply chain. And again, it's so important that since the therapy has been customized for an individual patient, that therapy needs to be given to only that particular patient. And to really manage this complexity, one really need to have an end-to-end visibility so that all the activities across the stakeholders, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a patient, payer, manufacturing organization, or quality team, should have everything in one place, right? And we really need to have a high data integrity because it's about the individual treatment, and we really need to have a full traceability and auditability. So I truly believe that the data integrity, privacy, and traceability become paramount in such therapies because we really need to track the process end to end so that we can really give the right treatment to the right patient. And I think this is the way going forward because I think the treatments are becoming more and more individualized, or what we call as the precision medicines that is meant for the individual treatment. And I think this is a challenge, and that's the reason actually the access and the scalability is a challenge today. But I think these are the breakthrough innovations which we are doing, and in the future we need to see that how best we can really scale and make sure that the affordability and the accessibility of such therapies can be broadened so that larger patient pool or larger unmet need can be addressed.
Since you brought in the issue of traceability in this conversation, Deepak, I just want to continue on this. Now, blockchain is emerging as a very leading technology, which is being leveraged for identifying counterfeit and managing traceability in the entire supply chain. So, what is your take on that? To what extent is it being deployed in the pharma industry, or what is the future thing you look for as a very important tool itself, as a blockchain technology?
Yeah, so I think blockchain is one of the promising platform what we are seeing in terms of trace and track. And one of the use case we are working with the Pharma Ledger, which is a consortium of like 28 partners coming from public and private. And you might have seen that whenever you buy a medicine, you find up a packaging box, a paper leaflet. So these paper leaflet is basically something very tiny. You can see it has been written. That is about the product information that is meant for the patient or the healthcare professional to really see that how they can really take that medicine in a way, right? And we really print these leaflet billions every year. And the challenge what you really have seen that I don't know how many of us really have read those small tiny written printed leaflets, right? And you know that since it is go through the entire cycle of manufacturing, the updates cannot really happen instantaneously because it is really linked with the production cycle. And also there's a cost, and also I think we all heard that environmental impact because you need a paper, you need a printing, you need ink, you need logistics to transfer those materials, and also the waste at the end, the paper waste that happens at the consumer end, right? So we are working on a concept called e-leaflet, which is called the electronic leaflet. And this is basically where we are saying that how we can really transform the paper leaflet, which goes as a paper with a QR code on the product itself. So the patient can really access using the iPhone, but typically like how we access the other QR codes to really get all the important product information related to the treatment. So with this implementation, we are saving a lot of paper in terms of printing. We are reducing the loss of a lot of waste because of the outdated labels and the previous printing labels. And also we can really update all the information in terms of safety, clinical information, real time. And also it offers real benefit in terms of anti-counterfeit checks and all. So this is something is not a use case. I said it's a use case, but we really launched it, our first electronic leaflet product in Japan last month, and now we are launching it in Singapore. And I think, and more companies are coming in this space because I think it's a clear value, not for the patient, but for them as well in terms of reducing their cost, and also to the environment in terms of really reducing the waste that really goes. And I think blockchain is one of the promising technology. There might be other technology, but this is something that we are actively pursuing as an industry.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I think being in the middle of the pandemic, especially a panel like this talking about supply chain in the pharma, I think without touching upon this question, the whole discussion would be incomplete. In fact, the pandemic has been an eye-opener for all of us, in terms of how there are huge gaps in some of the entire supply chain management, what could be done, and how it has really forced the organization to rethink whether they would, the whole just-in-time sourcing would still be valid, how manufacturing has been done. I think this question I want to ask Vikram, specifically in the last, I would say 1.5 year plus. What has been the change in the process of sourcing raw materials, the pharma industry at large, and what impact has this pandemic really brought into the thought process of sourcing and manufacturing at organizational levels?
Sure, Dr. Lakshmi. I think that's quite a loaded question and quite relevant, like you rightly said. I mean, this is pivotal to how we are going to de-risk our supply chains going forward. So I caught a word that you asked in a question about just in time. Pharma being heavily regulated, we hardly had just in time. But just in time is now getting coined as a different connotation, is now become just in case. So we are looking at different scenarios. I mean, again, like I said, pharma being heavily regulated, having alternate vendors or alternate sources of manufacturing is both costly and time consuming, because anything that we change in terms of our raw material or our active APIs or any primary component need to go through a stability cycle, a regulatory approval cycle, because we are probably the third most regulated industry in the world after nuclear and aviation. So, and rightly so, because we are dealing with critical life-saving drugs which are meant for human consumption. So, but having said that, in the last 18 months, and I would say even before that, a lot of companies were actually looking at a lot of localization, a lot of onshore sourcing, so that we can de-risk our supply chains, make our global supply chains a little more local. And that is where, in the last 18 months, I've heard a term which I would want to share over here is deglobalization. So earlier we used to talk about globalization and everything. Now we are talking about localization or deglobalization, where we are trying to be much more in control of our supply chains. And again, a lot of digital initiatives is helping over here, because we are trying to get information about not just our suppliers, but our suppliers, and have that kind of visibility through platforms like Deepak was mentioning, and even Debashish about blockchain and smart digital tools, which can help us make these decisions to make our de-risk our supply chains, so that we are much better in control. And the future, what I look at is, there is going to be a lot of transitional shift with respect to how we source our material, which areas we source, how many vendors do we have for critical products, which are top line blockbuster products for a particular organization. We have to look at all those things, but it is going to be a long drawn process. Currently, just to share our statistics with the group, we are sourcing almost about 65 to 70% of our API and raw materials from China, from one location. India is the pharmacy to the world. We about 40% of the drugs which are generic drugs which are consumed in US are supplied by India. More than 30% of the drugs which go in Europe are coming from India. So we have a lot of stake in this. A lot of world healthcare is relying on India right now. We can see in the vaccine phase also how quickly we were able to develop the vaccine, deliver it, the AstraZeneca model, and how many people we've been able to vaccinate all over the globe. So the onus is really on us as an Indian pharmaceutical industry to look at initiatives which can make our supply chains a little less complex. I don't think they will become completely complex free, but make them a little less complex, and so that we as supply chain managers have better control on the critical nodes of the supply chain. That's my take, Dr. Lakshmi.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Debashish, I just wanted your, I would say, perspective on how the pandemic has really impacted your whole management of the supply chain. At any one or two stories, if you could share, few
Absolutely.
snippets. Yeah.
Sure. So I think I will just take one example about, how we have been struggling with accuracy and agility, right? I mean, these are the two terms which we have been, again, long debated in the demand planning world, right? And when I talk about agility first, so agility is something which is post occurrence of an event, right? Which is the reaction agility. And trust me, this is very difficult to achieve because it increases the cost of the overall supply chain, right? While reaction agility in execution is very, very important, anticipation agility in demand planning, as Vikram was mentioning, right, is also possible. So what if instead of reacting to an already occurred event, one could anticipate the event well in advance to either mitigate or leverage the impact of that event, right? And in such a methodology, if we adopt that, that is where technology comes into play, right? So with AI and machine learning, empowered with the right business context, I would say, and forecasting models, teams can be equipped with the ability to anticipate future changes or exceptions, empowering them with the true agility that helps them be better prepared and improve both accuracy and consistency together. So it can, I mean, it's not that there has to be, these two things have to be in loggerheads, they can go hand in hand. And again, just touching upon where Deepak left, right, on the topic of blockchain, right? So I would say there are a couple of things. Blockchain is one of them, definitely, which we have utilized. And especially from a counterfeit standpoint, we are doing some pilots here and there just to see how that can help us evolve the overall track and trace, tracking secondary sales data all the way to the tertiary sales happens. Plus, in addition to that, there are certain other areas which post-pandemic has taken a lot of, have evolved a lot of times, which is one is operational effectiveness, right? And when I say operational effectiveness, it is helping us enable tracking of near expiry of goods sold to ensure liquidation and reduce expiry claims. So that is one area of focus which has evolved very recently. A second is insights helping us have a dashboard kind of a view on the sales performance at a territory BU level for marketers to have more informed decision making, right? And the last would be a better customer engagement that can help increase influence over distributors, plus increasing efficiency at CFAs by reducing order intake times. So these are some of the use cases which we are like kind of contemplating. Some of them are in advanced stages. So that's my take.
Great, great. Yeah, thank you so much. I think you probably, having come to the end of the discussion, you brought in the right, I would say, words which are very hot today, whether it's IoT, AI, ML, a whole lot of things. So as a passing shot, the last probably, I want each of you to probably give a one or two liner about what is your perception on how which are the technology enablers, which could play a very important role going forward, specifically in the pharma supply chain industry. We would start with any of you.
I can go first if
Yeah, please.
That is okay. Yeah. So, Dr. Lakshmi, the technology enablers, I mean, like we've discussed throughout the panel, there are multiple things, but in my mind, optimum demand sensing and forecasting could be a good start for us, where we more accurately are able to, look at what kind of numbers are coming through in the VUCA world that we're living in today. I feel that if we can look at that one piece, the starting piece of information, that can have a cascading effect down chain, in terms of how we are building capacities, what kind of technology and tools we are keeping to ensure procurement happens smoothly, and what kind of inventory levels we look at, and kind of warehousing we have. So it kind of encompasses everything that we talked about in supply chain, with one starting factor with respect to how we do our demand sensing in the VUCA world. So that's my key takeaway.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to build on what Vikram said, I think technologies are just the tools of achieving what we really want to achieve. But I think what is the more fundamental is whether we are making things more transparent, whether we are able to communicate, onboard our suppliers, understand where are the gaps. And for me, actually, I think the focus for us has not been looking into in supply chain looking into like manufacturing or like distribution, but really look more from a product perspective. Then only you can really look at where are the opportunities for us to really serve our patient with less cost, with less inventory, at the same time manage that service levels high. So I think a product management view is very important rather than a technology view. Technologies are enabler, but I think we really need to have a product end-to-end view, at least for the major brands to really support our patients at the end of the day.
Great. Yeah, I think Debashish, your last shot.
I think we have already spoken about a lot of technology pieces. So we spoke about AI, we spoke about ML, we spoke about Deepak touch based upon blockchain. And all of this, there are certain things which is common, which is various stakeholders, right? And if I talk about blockchain, just for an example again, so the interesting thing is that you can always track back any transaction in the blockchain to its origin, right? So maybe I will summarize with what is the change that we need to do, right? The shift that is required in the industry. So I would say researchers, academia, drug manufacturers, and all the distributors in the supply chain network, right, would need to work together to make this happen. And that is a big change. That is a big change from how we operate today. So I think that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. I think we've just touched the time. Yeah, thank you all. I think it's been a very, very interesting insight to me as well, going into the whole thought process of managing pharma supply chain. Thank you all. Thank you for the time and wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi.
Yes, stay
Thank you.
connected. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank
Have
you.
a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lakshmi, for the brilliant panel discussion, and also to all the panelists for sharing their experience on the visibility, planning, as well as digitalization imperatives across the healthcare supply ecosystem. Thank you all. Moving forward. Yeah, thank you. Moving forward,